Good morning. Welcome back. You had a quick glimpse there of Mr. Roeloff Horne, who's back with us today. He's a returning guest. I'm very happy to have a chat with him today about discretionary fund management and fund managers and sort of demystifying what this is all about and a couple of other things. So really looking forward to getting into the discussion with him today. I think it's something different from what we've done before on the show. So really happy to have him back and to continue a discussion with him and to be an insightful morning for you. So good morning, welcome back. Very nice to have you with us this morning. As I said, I want to get into saying good morning. We've got Quibus, good morning. I've got Denise and Chart, and we've got Elmin and Malcolm. Let me just see. Good morning to myself, where I said good morning to all of my friends here. Then Raymond Western, good morning. Renee and Ian McMaster. Ian, just a happy birthday. It was your second birthday on Monday, not yours, but FS4P, so Financial Solutions for Professionals. I'm very happy to be associated with you, and I just want to wish you, continued success and everything that's happening. I think you've done a fantastic job, you and Lizette Gerber. You've both been, involved in what we do and also on the podcast. Lizette's been a guest there and all of it. And it's just a privilege to be working with you and to know you and that. So, just from my side, I hope you have a fantastic third year and that things will go from strength to strength. I really believe that you're building a fantastic business. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to say that to you. It's really, really awesome. So Tinus, goeiemôre. Raymond, goeiemôre. We've got Terence. Good morning, Terence. Where is that double espresso? He sent me a little video clip yesterday where he's making a double espresso. I was very envious, although I don't drink espresso, but I do things with that espresso. So, definitely something that we can get onto. My friend Renate, goeiemôre. We've got France in the house. Good morning, France. Welcome. I've got Arun and Mark in the in Oz. I almost said in the UK. It's not the UK. It's Oz in Melbourne. Good morning, Mark. Thank you very much for joining us again. With you, it's good evening, I guess. Francis, goeiemôre. Nice to have you back. Pleasure, Ian. Johan Vosloo, my friend, goeiemôre. Gadziandi, good morning. Kevin, good morning. Kuvendra. So, we are a lot of people in the house, and I'm really looking forward to this discussion. As I said, I don't have any particular announcements I want to make, except that I just want to remind you quickly of of my guest on Friday. We'll be speaking to Lisa Gering, about conquering your own Mount Everest. And she climbed some serious mountains. It's not the copy in Welkom where I'm from originally. So, I'm from Henneman. So, Henneman, there is nothing everything's flat there. So, I had to refer to this. At least a copy Alleenberg in Welkom. But anyway, if you're not from there, you won't get the joke. Alrighty, so with that, let me get into today. I am happy to welcome back now a friend, Roeloff Horne. Good morning, Roeloff. Very nice to have you with us this morning.
Morning, Francois. Morning, listeners. Nice to be back. It's a privilege to be back and be invited. Thank you.
Awesome. I was wondering this morning, actually, while I was finishing, have you played any golf since this whole lockdown? Because I know you said you love golf. And have you played golf?
I do, maybe just in my dreams, Francois.
I was wondering.
I've become a specialist Gran Turismo driver. It's PlayStation. I've actually won a couple of races online against the kids, and that's my best achievement over lockdown period by far.
Okay, I'm not going to ask you what your screen name is or your gaming name. I'm not going to do that. But no, I was wondering if your backyard still had any grass in it, just maybe divot everywhere.
The drought in Cape Town organized my wife to have a lot of stones and plants and so no grass.
I thought. No, that's good stuff. Guys, for you that haven't seen Roelof's previous episode, it was episode 41, where I spoke to him and we were talking about what's going on. It was a bit of a different flavor to the normal, in what's happening to the economy, what do we think is going to happen. We got some great feedback from that episode. So if you missed that one, it's still very relevant. So go look at episode 41. And there I introduced Roeloff. So Roeloff is from Might and Optimal. And Roeloff, just do a quick introduction just for the people that maybe don't know you yet. Just quickly, what do you do at Might and where you fit in?
Francois, I'm head of SA Portfolio Management of Mitre and Optimal. We're discretionary fund managers, what we're going to talk about today, discretionary portfolio management. We also have a range of unit trusts that I'm responsible for, but I've got a team that supports me in terms of analysis, valuations, economics, and trends. So I'm just eventually the responsible or the person to blame or to praise, but that happens very often sometimes, and sometimes it's very lonely out there. But in the end, what we do is discretionary fund management, and that's the topic we're going to talk about.
Yeah, awesome. And yeah, I mean, it's usually, you know how it goes in investment management. When things are going bad, then you hear from everybody. But when things are going well, it's you just. So I think no, it's not always that lonely when there's no problems and there's no mistakes being made. But it's actually lonely when it's going well. I think sometimes it's the opposite.
Sometimes it's got its positives and negatives. I've realized again in bear markets or tough markets, you work a lot harder. And you need to communicate to financial advisors, and they obviously to their clients. So we need to supply that kind of support. But when the markets are doing well, everybody, we do enjoy the industry a lot more. You know, we can play more golf, we can have more friendly lunches. So we miss those days.
Yes, which is something we must do. Definitely. Guys, so please remember to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, or connect with me on LinkedIn. I guess you're very welcome to connect with Roeloff and any of the guys from Mitre as well if you wanted to. You're welcome to do that on LinkedIn. So please remember to do that and give us some love and share the show and this episode, and comment. Please interact in the chats, and even if you're watching the recording, first of all, thank you for watching the recording, and secondly, please comment. Share your views and your opinions down below. You can still do that. And we look forward to engaging with you further on that. If you've got any questions for Roeloff, please post them. I will definitely get to them at the end of the discussion so that we can answer some questions. All right, so Roeloff, let's get into it. I mean, if we talk about DFM, it sounds like DFM. It could be a radio station, but that's not what it stands for. It is actually discretionary fund management, or fund managers sometimes. What is that? What is it actually all about in just plain layman's terms? I know there are definitely some advisors out there already using DFMs, and they've been using them for quite a while. But in essence, what is a DFM?
It's also referred to in the industry as a DIM, discretionary investment managers. Okay. So for those that call it DIM, we also DIMs. My head of implementation, he said, I object. I can't be head of DIM, because that doesn't sound right. So we like the terminology fund management. What we do is we are professional portfolio construction specialists, in my view. And that can be in the form of a discretionary portfolio, a living annuity portfolio, a targeted portfolio locally for income, a targeted portfolio for growth locally, and similarly offshore. So we have local, and most discretionary managers have local portfolios for local investors, for income, moderate, or growth portfolios, and the same offshore. And many of the solutions are available on LISPs. You all know what LISPs are, and linked investment service providers. And some discretionary portfolio managers also have CIS offerings, unit trusts, that investors can buy directly, or where the advisor chooses that optionality, maybe for CGT purposes, or maybe just because it's more practical to implement your views in a CIS rather than a portfolio on the LISP. Because implementation on a LISP, some of them have freeze periods, and you can only do bulk switches once a month. So it becomes a bit of a constraint from time to time, especially in volatile markets. So in short, a discretionary fund manager manages a portfolio of unit trusts, but it can also invest other themes, specialist themes we can talk about later. But it's, in my view, the benefit for the advisor using a discretionary portfolio manager is a regulatory protection. So the advisor, believe it or not, even currently in terms of regulation, has to have a documented investment process if the FSCA eventually audits them, or if there's discrepancy in terms of a client claim, you have to have a documented investment process. We provide that. For the biggest other advisor benefit, in my view, is time, because technically, there's a lot of advisors I know that can actually perform the action of a discretionary fund manager. They've got the knowledge, experience, they know managers, they know investment themes. They're good at investment advice and even investment management. But the dilemma is really they need to spend time coaching the client. And it's very hard to be able to coach your client, spend the necessary time with your client, plus perform a regulatory framework of an investment process, i.e. research, macroeconomics, valuation, technical analysis, and all those things to formulate a view. Because I can challenge any advisor out there in terms of formulating a portfolio. You have to perform a house view, because the days of just looking at Morningstar and throwing a dart at the best performer and hoping to get it right are over, without any doubt. You can just look at the differentiation between large managers, specialist managers in our industry right now, or even large managers as we are right now, with the different portfolio construction methodology or views at the moment. So in the end, the advisor has to formulate the house view to construct his portfolio, and the discretionary fund manager can assist him in that process.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of time to make sure that you're up to date and that you really consider everything, apart from the skills that you need to be able to do that. So where's the fine line between investment advice, investment management, and when does it become, I don't know, I'm going to ask you a question that I'm just asking the question, like, when does it become like wealth management? Where's the line between all these things? Because you have financial advisors, and then you have advisors calling themselves investment advisors or wealth managers. Where, in your view, is the line between these, or are they mainly the same thing?
I think the line is within the mandate that the client signs with a discretionary fund manager, because that makes a clear distinction who's responsible for the investment management process and the outcome. So that to me is the line. But coming back to your concern about wealth management and portfolio management and whether you can combine it, that's really the business owner or the shareholder's priority to decide whether, as a wealth manager, you want to provide a discretionary portfolio management service within the structure of the business, which means it's a Category 2 license you need to have. But that doesn't disallow them to actually have a Category 1 license as well to do advice, which can include a variety of wealth management options, as you know, life assurance and everything else. So the distinction is within two lines, in my view. A, you have to have a Category 2 license to perform your duties as a portfolio manager. You can even, when you have that license, decide to appoint a discretionary fund manager as your engine room. That said, that concept is being looked at by the FSCA and in RDR that could actually be necessary to have your own operations as a Category 2. But we still have clients that are Category 2 where we are the engine room and play a consultant role or asset consult role for that specific Category 2. So to answer your question, it's possible within current regulation that one business with one group of shareholders can have two licenses, a Category 2 license as a DFM, and you have to have the operational capability and implementation capability to perform those duties. And then secondly, you can perform a Category 2 wealth management service to your clients where those individuals and key individuals and authorized reps purely focus on advice only. So that's also what the regulator wants to achieve, is to make sure everybody gets paid for what they do and to make regulation clear and make that line specific away between advice and portfolio management. But short and sweet, if there's anybody that asks me what is the real line, it's the actual signing of a mandate between the client and the discretionary portfolio manager. So the advisor then can really have regulatory protection in terms of the outcome of the investment. In other words, you have somebody else to blame.
Yeah, which isn't always like, it's not, it's definitely a good thing to have. But also I think it's more than having somebody to blame. It's more about having that confidence in what it is that you can offer, and that that you're backed, that you are not alone in this whole thing. So it's not about, so this, I'm taking away all the risk from myself. It's really like I've got a big boot who's walking with me and helping me, and that I can say with confidence. Because, I mean, I've seen this. I've been in this game now since 1998. And I know it looks like I started yesterday. But it's one of those things where, a lot of advisors have built their value around being able to choose the right funds. And that's why I say some of them call themselves investment managers, and it's cool. No issue with that. But I don't think that we always get the risk that you're at. And I think to manage those things, and I'm saying like people who are on a category 1 license, they're not category 2, so they can't do bulk switches and they can't do things that you are able to do. They've got to do things one by one. So I think the risk that you sit with, if you need to move people, or you want to change your view on certain things, etc., to have those things rebalanced, etc., it becomes quite a mission. And I believe that what clients are looking for from an advisor have really moved on considerably. And it's now moving even faster. It's almost like we've caught up with technology. Like, I don't know, some people say 3-4 years we've advanced. I think it's maybe more like 10. But it's like we've caught up very quickly because we had to. And I think the same is going to happen now. It's going to come much more to the fore what clients are really looking for. All of these things is very important, because this is what makes things happen, and what creates the outcomes and the results and the returns and all of it. But the advisors need to start focusing on some other stuff with clients to help them really define what it is that they're looking for, and then have somebody that can, well, that's just my opinion anyway. I think that's where I see things are going.
On that topic, Francois, sorry to interrupt you, but you mentioned they have to do switches one by one with a client, which is technically what the regulation requires in terms of a category 1 license. But the lists have been very naughty over the last, call it 5-6 years, and they've actually provided the client with a choice on the application form to allow the advisor to implement instructions on his behalf. And most of the advisors must realize that you still actually needed a category 2 license to implement switches between one fund and another if you did not consult and get the written consent of that client to actually perform that action. And what that meant is that just because many advisors got used to the fact that you can do online switching, they actually don't realize that they need a DFM from a regulatory perspective if they do so without client consent. I'm not saying they do, but the lists have sort of spoiled the implementation element of that by allowing category 1 advisors to switch portfolios and really keeping them responsible. And advisors must realize if they selected the wrong fund or the wrong fund name, or there's a recourse for any reason where the client complains to the service provider or the regulator for what the advisor did in terms of that switch, he's 100% liable for that element of decision. And he could actually have regulatory recourse from the FCA if he did so without client consent, specific client consent on that specific switch. And that's something that advisors don't always realize. And I'm not blaming them, because the lists just spoil you in terms of the service capability that they sell to you. So just sort of a highlight of that risk from my perspective.
Yeah, it's important, because it's still up to the advisor the route that they want to take. And because I know, like, when things change, or when there's things that come to far, like, until they tell me to do differently, we'll just keep doing what we're doing because it's working for us. But at least they have the information to sort of make that decision. Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about, where does DFM really, what is the approach that you follow, and where does it fit in with the advisor, and where does it fit in with the client? Are DFMs now like a third sort of, a third party to this whole conversation and the whole advice process? Do you work seemingly in the background? Do you communicate with clients? What is the approach to all of this?
We're definitely a third party in the process. So you've got the client, the advisor, you've got the product supplier, which is a fourth party. and ourselves, obviously, the discretionary fund manager being responsible to manage the portfolio. Our responsibilities start with investment research. Obviously, we're responsible for the implementation of the portfolio, the administration of that, and also we report to both the advisor and the client. We have a regulatory duty to report quarterly to the client, which we do. So we report on his portfolio specifically, with comments and changes we made, and so that's part of our responsibility, and it's part of any discretionary fund manager's service. And important, we have a range of portfolios, as said, locally and globally. So where the service differentiates itself between advisors are as follows. Number one, we have core portfolios, which is really our best view for every portfolio locally or globally. And that will include our complete investment process results. So that's really available for the advisor with a 50 million rand book or 30 million rand book, and he just doesn't want to actually make these decisions and just choose a portfolio, align the client in terms of an income solution or a growth solution, and really just tick the box at the list. Obviously, he must be linked, or she must be linked to that model portfolio at Allan Gray, Investec, Glacier, Momentum, wherever the model portfolios are. We're at most lists. So then basically the advisor must promote our service, sign the mandate, and in terms of the quotation and implementation process at the list, we just selects the model portfolio of the discretionary fund manager. So that's what we call a core portfolio. It's available to the wide range of advisors available across the country. But in our case, we also have a service for the larger IFA network or the larger IFA book. So call it 250 million plus, where these guys, as you mentioned, many of them are really specialist investment advisors. And they come to grips with the fact that they need to insource this capability to really have what we call a documented investment process. So then we act as, yes, the chairman and the implementation vehicle, but we do it more on a consultative process with that large IFA network or the large advisor. So that means that their current portfolio structure that they have, we respect that, because some discretionary clients will have CGT implications. So we have a look at this current portfolio, their current investment process, and all we do is we refine it in terms of making sure that both his demands and his way of, or her way of constructing portfolios for clients are compliant relative to our process and obviously relative to the industry requirements. So in terms of the fit, we're definitely a third leg. If you take the client, the advisor, we definitely the third leg. And then obviously the product supplier, whether it's an endowment, a unit trust, or a list that you use as a solution. So that's where we fit in. I hope I answer that question appropriately.
Yeah, that's cool. And then, something that has really been, I've just been looking at the comments quickly, and I can see that there's a number of people alluding to this. And this is that, the more people that get involved into this process, it obviously means that there's additional fees. So I want to talk a little bit about the fees that are payable in general, and then the value that's being added, to the process. So does the value that comes from using a DFM for both, for both the advisor and the client, outweigh the additional cost, from that perspective? So does it justify the additional layer of cost? And just in general, how much is that cost, more or less?
Okay. Very fair question. And my view is that in life, if your business model, whatever it is, can't add value, you won't be in business. So discretionary fund managers have that challenge to provide the value that the advisor and the client needs. The price. Core portfolios, where we don't do the tailored consultative process with the IFA network or the larger IFA book. We have core portfolios. We charge 0.18% plus VAT. So it ends up at 0.2, I guess. And that's where it's a tick box process. The client mandate is signed. So the IFA basically gets the mandate signed and ticks the box on the list quotation, goes into the model portfolio, and we report quarterly. And we also have online feedback sessions to all those IFAs that want to just touch base and understand why we selected one fund relative to another, why we have indexation in the portfolio, or whatever the reason is the portfolio is constructed in that way. So we do provide an online feedback service for the smaller IFA who just ticks the box on our core portfolio. So that's 0.18 plus VAT. Then when we deal with a network, obviously there's more cost involved because we need to travel, or we need to provide investment committee services, and therefore we charge between 0.2 and 0.25, depending on the size of the assets under management. In some cases, we have advisors who simply selected another view. Obviously, they have to have a large asset base to actually construct a CIS for them, so a unit trust. And that obviously entails daily implementation. So you have to charge higher for a unit trust than for a model portfolio. Model portfolio, you put a portfolio in place, and only when you want to hire or fire a specific manager, or hire or fire a specific theme, you do switches, which sometimes is twice a year, 3 times a year at max. So the implementation is less severe with a model portfolio. But when the IFA elects a CIS as the solution, and we obviously do that, then the price increases to 0.35 or 0.4, depending of what the solution is about. So it varies, to answer your question, between, I think there's certain DFMs that do charge 15 basis points. I'm not sure what exactly that entails in terms of the service offering, but it's from 0.15, 0.18 to literally 0.4 for unit trusts. So, but I would say on average, the fees are between 20 and 25 basis points on average in the industry. Just want to give a commercial to a very, very good study of discretionary fund managers that was published lately with a collaborative exchange. They're not paying me for this advertise or this commercial, but they've targeted 8 DFMs in the country and have done a proper due diligence on all 8. And I think it's available. If you just follow LinkedIn, you'll find collaborative exchange, and you will be able to access it. And maybe my colleagues that are listening in can actually just republish that, or just send a link of that publication. But that's a great document for advisors to have a look at all the providers and what their fees are, what their processes are, what kind of portfolios do they manage. So that will demonstrate the value of each and every DFM available in the market. So it's a long story, but as said, in the end, if you don't add value, you can forget your business. So we need to do that. There's just another commercial on the fees. At this stage, I think there's a lot of advisors that will attest that some managers, if you take the large guys, the good guys in the industry, well, not the good guys, the large guys, the known brand names, there's disparity of up to 20% in returns over the last year, and some maybe 25 or 30% over the last 2 years in terms of cumulative differentiation between a good or a fund manager that's done well relative to somebody that's done less well. Now, the value that the discretionary fund manager is supposed to add is to avoid that 30% and to actually have continued second quartile or first quartile performance. First quartile is not always easy, because that means you had to get all your calls right in terms of manager or asset allocation selection. But the objective, and this is how any advisor should measure a discretionary fund manager in terms of performance, is second quartile, but consistent second quartile performance. So his performance has to be above average. Otherwise, he's not adding the value, or they are not adding the value.
Yeah. And I just want to mention, so Collaborative Exchange is Kevin Hinton. So he was also on the show. I think it was episode 27 or somewhere around there. And he actually, after the show, showed me sort of the document just before they published it. So I'm not sure exactly how one gets hold of it, but you could go just to Collaborative Exchange, or just look up Kevin Hinton on LinkedIn, and you can ask him directly there. Yeah, so that's good stuff. So just before I move on from fees, Can you command any sort of discounts in terms of fees from like the fund managers that you use and the funds that you use to build the portfolios, the model portfolios and that things with? Can you sort of, have you got any power there to sort of say, listen, because we are managing all of this money and we're using your portfolios, can you give us better fees? Is that possible? Does that happen?
And I would rather say it did happen, and there is still possibilities of that. But with treating clients fairly in the industry, the lists are all moving with the asset managers to have one clean class available for all investors. But where we make a difference is, let's assume there's a fund that's not available on the list. And if we have high conviction that we want to use that specific theme or that specific fund, we have the bulking power to go to the list provider and request that fund to be available. And therefore, we can look a lot different relative to your Main Street portfolio. But in terms of the bulking of fees, I would say we definitely had that benefit, but that's disappearing as the industry is moving to treating clients fairly, so that on the list, there's only a clean fee class available, and therefore one class of fees. And it eases the administration for both the fund manager as well as the list. So I would like to answer that and say we had that benefit, but now the industry is moving towards a more fair institutional approach. But I think our main benefit in terms of that subject is the fact that because of our bulk, we can insist on certain elements to be added on lists. For example, indexation. I think we were one of the first on the Allan Gray platform to insist on certain indexation solutions or funds, and we got it. And therefore, we could reduce costs that way, and actually it also assisted us with a lot of outperformance in over the long term.
Yeah. I want to just throw a question in here from Shlanganani, because I think it's a brilliant question, because this is maybe where the lines can be blurred. He's asking, how would discretionary fund management differ from multi-management? I think that's a good question.
It's actually, it's the same process, same thinking, but I think it's about implementation. That's the difference. A multi-manager normally has a unit trust or a fund of funds, and he implements it via a CIS. A DFM can do exactly that, or he can implement a portfolio on the list where when the client sees the statement, he sees your, call it 91 now, not an Investec, or your Prudential, or your Allan Gray, or your Coronation Fund, or your Satrix Fund, or your Signia Fund in the portfolio. So it's not all the reference to the model is the Miton Optimal Conservative Income or the Miton Optimal aggressive portfolio, aggressive growth portfolio. So it's just a naming convention that's on the list. That really it's an admin capability on the list that the DFM offers, whereas normally a multi-manager uses a CIS with a fund of funds, and it's got a naming convention that's, call it a BCI fund or a IP fund of funds or a Sanlam or Glacier fund of funds. I'm just naming a few names just to help the concept, but in essence they do the same thing. The implementation is just the one probably focus on a CIS multi-manager, and a DFM uses model portfolios on lists. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and also I think a big difference for me is that you are talking directly to the advisors or the FSPs or who you're doing the work on whose behalf you're doing the work. So there's feedback, there's consultation. A multi-manager is not going to consult with you about what you want and what you're looking for and whether you agree with the views or, there's no consultation. They just do what they do and then that's it. They just make all these promises.
You're not a pretty face, eh? You're very clever. You're right.
Yeah, my wife says that as well.
Good for you.
All right. So in terms of the advice process, Roeloff, we've spoken about where do you fit into the relationship between the client and the advisor and the product provider. So where do you sit there? But also then there's the advice process. So does a DFM get involved in the advice process? Do you get into do you help with the advice process, or is it just that, based on different solutions or different model portfolios, the advisor can easily with confidence select a fund for a particular sort of client and with particular goals and situations? Or where do you fit into the advice process specifically?
It's the DFM's choice whether they want to get involved in the advice process or not. I'm still talking generically. The DFM can decide that no, they don't get involved in the advice process, but it differs. Some DFMs actually have tools and processes to assist the advisor, who still remain responsible for the advice at the end. But some DFMs provide advisors with that kind of tool. Some provide them with a record of advice templates, and therefore it's still the advisor remains responsible for the advice process, but the DFM do provide certain tools to assist in the advice process. Speaking on behalf of ourselves, we certainly have the capability to assist on the advice process, but that comes with a different, call it service offering and conditions. And that obviously is negotiable via our consultants. So any DFM can choose to what extent they want to get involved in the advice process or not. So that if they actually, some DFMs probably can create a wealth management service and a Category 1 service and allow financial advisors to use the services of that business to actually be co-responsible in terms of the advice process between the DFM and the advisor. So answer is, it's absolutely the DFM's choice if they want to provide that advice process service, and some do, some don't. So as said, it depends on the DFM's choice to become involved in the advice process and to provide tools or not. So that's what the due process for the advisor is a little bit harder, to look at the DFM and see what do they offer, what do they need, meaning, and what does the advisor need from the DFM, and then need to decide whether he only uses the investment capability of the DFM or whether he wants to also use the tools and the reporting capability and everything else that the DFMs provide. So there's no standard rule in terms of what the DFM provides or not. It's a choice that the business model provides the advisor.
Yeah, awesome. So, and in terms then of, so if that's the process, then it's also just running through my head, I'm thinking like, oh, so the discretionary fund manager also have a discretion to choose whether they want to do some things or not. But anyway, it's just on a lighter note. So let's talk quickly about just the process, and we have, I think we've touched on many of these aspects, maybe when it comes to the process that a DFM follows in order to make the decisions and come up with that investment process, etc. Do you also help advisors create like an investment policy statement, or is that the same as the process that you spoke about earlier?
Yeah, because they really adopt that documented investment process for themselves, and you can co-brand it. Even in your reporting, you can co-brand with an advisor. So it provides the advisor with that regulatory protection. But let's talk process quickly. When it doesn't matter whether you're a Cat 2 advisor or Cat 2 discretionary fund manager, or whether you're an advisor, you have to formulate an investment process, and that entails macroeconomic research. It entails valuation analysis. It should entail technical analysis or momentum or sentiment, and therefore that's outside fund manager research, whether it's equity managers, global managers, local managers. And also in that case, you have to have a documented process to actually have a due diligence questionnaire per fund company. So in our case, we have a company due diligence questionnaire as well as a fund due diligence questionnaire, and then to have a view in terms of where that fund or fund manager fits in terms of the investment process. So it's not just about a macroeconomic view, evaluations and technicals. That comes without saying in terms of constructing a portfolio and having a view as to what themes you want to be overweight or underweight, or asset classes that you want to avoid or include. But that's one set of the process. The second process is then fund manager research, and that now includes indexation and also becomes more involved because you can actually have ESG solutions that's coming to the party at the moment, and hedge funds. So it's a wide variety of processes that you need to follow. And hence why my question to advisor is, why not a DFM? If you want to achieve all of these regulatory processes, you need an infrastructure to do that. So my question is almost, why not use that process? It's cheap. It's way too cheap. 0.18% or 0.2% is definitely worth that regulatory protection.
Yes, and just quickly about the ESGs and the hedge funds and those kind of things. So can you actually offer your own funds in that respect, or do you only research them and include them in your model portfolios? Where does that now fit in?
Only the latter. So we're not specialists in hedge funds or in ESG solutions. There's two issues. Availability is probably the big one, especially on lists. If you do run models, then the daily pricing of hedge funds is a challenge for lists to be able to accommodate hedge funds, because most of them price monthly, so they have to change their methodology, although they're now all CISs. But the industry is moving towards that. So we intend to soon launch a portfolio that includes hedge funds as well as normal CIS solutions. So we definitely in that, it's definitely one of our objectives to include hedge funds in our portfolios. Then, for instance, indexation. So typically your Signia solutions, your Satrix solutions, your new funds, or Stanlip is now One Invest. We create indexation portfolios, which is low-cost portfolios, because many clients, especially maybe the long-term investors or millennials that only want low-cost solutions, or certain astute investors. So we have solutions on platforms that only invest in indexation. We also have our own CIS funds that's actually done extremely well over the last 5 years that only uses indexation components. And therefore, it lowers the cost of the portfolio and makes it easier for the IFA to promote to the client. So we're not just one-dimensional in terms of model portfolios, a core range. We also do the tailored consultative process. We also do indexation models. We're about to include hedge funds in models, and ESG is now becoming more streamlined in terms of the availability of ESG funds. There used to be only one provider that does it. Now there's a couple. So that's also a process that one needs to follow, because soon you will have to differentiate between the better or the worse ESG solution. Something else that we do is like on a discovery platform. Certain advisors say, listen, to be able to do all this integration and solutions that the clients certainly need in terms of the discovery process, please build me a portfolio with discovery funds only, i.e. discovery invest funds. And we do that. So depending on the solution, whether it's an income, a moderate Rec 28 solution, or a high growth solution, we then tailor a specific discovery-only portfolio for those advisors. And again, it provides them with regulatory protection on the discovery platform. And I'm sure they need it.
Yes. So that's awesome. Then obviously, I mean, I think there's about 40 DFMs in South Africa, if my research doesn't fail me, and whether my sources is up to date. But I mean, that could quite be a process. I guess that document from Kevin and the Collaborative Exchange can be a good start if you want to look at, how do I actually go about choosing a DFM?
Yeah.
Because this is like bringing a partner into your business. So you don't just want to go and say, okay, that one, that's not a good way of doing it. Then you could just as well do that with your unit trust choices. But how does one go about choosing a DFM to partner with?
Look, yes, I think that Collaborative Exchange document's a nice start, but there's other DFMs that's also as good and as competitive as those that were researched via that portal. So you need to go wider than the Collaborative Exchange document. But two things I want to say on choosing a DFM. Number one, you still have to have a documented process in the end. Just to say to the FECA, this is why I elected Fundal's Portfolio Matrix, PCI, Miton Optimal, or whoever, Sorry if I didn't name anybody, if somebody listens and feels
No.
I didn't name them. But so number one is the IFA must also provide his reasons why he selected the DFM, because that's also it's supposed to be a documented process that he has to have in file. The second thing is, and this is sort of an industry thing, and apart from, you have to add value and you have to do the right things as a DFM, end of story. But I have a saying in this industry, and I've been in this industry close to 36 years now. 37, it's bad, but it's great.
Yeah.
You know what? The industry is also about choosing one another because of the way you work and your way you handle the relationship between one another. So I have a saying that as a DFM, we hope to choose our IFAs, and as an IFA, I hope that you choose the right DFM because of the relationship that you can mold with you, your practice, and the DFM, as well as your clients. Because many of our DFMs also present to the clients in terms of, call it a get together. Nowadays, it must be online, I guess. But you, as an advisor, you must also gauge not just the capabilities and the performance and the service, but also the people. Because in the end, we want to enjoy what we do on a daily basis, and it's tough as it is. So to enjoy the people that you deal with is also important. But that doesn't mean that because you like people, you should appoint them. No, you should first do the right thing and do the appropriate process. See if it fits in with your portfolio construction methodology, and also whether the performance and the way the DFM provide its reporting and communication, whether that fits in with your business. And then maybe the last but important bit is to see if it fits in with your personality, your style of communicating with clients, and whether you will actually allow these people to actually present to your clients and feel proud with the association, because it is a marriage. It's not an engagement. It's not a dating process. It's a marriage.
Yeah, important point there. All right, so let me have a look at the comments quickly. What I've got here, so that's all the good mornings. Let me see. So we've spoken about that. Peter just added his 2 cents there, saying having a house view is one thing, but having a credible process for matching a portfolio to a client risk profile is another.
Completely true.
Absolutely. George also said DFMs will assist an advisor to create a professional centralized investment proposition that will professionalize the advisor's client value proposition. Yes, some proper
Big words
there, George.
Well,
Yeah, ek wou net say, like, well done, George. That's proper English now from this Free State guy, but I get what you're saying. That's awesome. So Cindy says, yeah, using a DFM does add a fee layer. Although I use a DFM very happily and successfully, I worry about how to reduce fees. So
I want to
maybe some.
I want to answer that.
Yeah, please.
Primarily by using indexation, and yes, there's some asset managers that you can use that actually are very competitive. But in terms of might on optimal, my answer is definitely. I can say this with high conviction that we have really focused on using indexation in our solutions over the last 5-6 years. And as said, we also have CISs that focus on that as well. So you can gauge that by looking at the CIS and its cost. It's first decile in terms of cost, that CIS, which means that if you include indexation in your portfolio, you do reduce cost. But the danger of the indexation for the IFA is that it still is an active choice. You need to choose between, let's call it an SA equity portfolio, which at the moment is a very tough choice. Whether you use an ALSI index, a CAP Swix index, a top 40 index, or a RAFI index, but that's a choice. And with that comes a cost. So to answer Cindy's question, in our case, the way we reduce overall fees, and I can guarantee you that our TERs will be as competitive as what you have at the moment when you include our 0.18%, or if it's a 0.2 or 0.25, depending on what the deal is, that our total TER will be very competitive, but in my view, probably cheaper than what you currently offer with a range of, call it, large, good asset managers in a portfolio.
Yeah, thank you for that. Then also, Neil is also asking a good question. Yes, he says, does a DFM have access to more funds than are normally available on the list platform? So all the list platforms will have like we only offer these funds or access to these funds, but can you actually get access to funds outside a list?
Well, yes, and that's what I said. That's the benefit that we now have. I said that the one benefit we have less control of is that the list move into one fee class for a specific asset manager, but where we still have clout is to include a fund that's not currently on the list. We can request it, get it on the list, and then use it. So we also have access to what they call restricted list at the back end. So the answer is yes.
Okay, cool. Then Kobus asks, why does the FSCA not like DFMs that much? So both Leanne and Caroline commented as such at presentations that he attended. So, I mean, is there a lot of engagement happening with the FSCA, because, I mean, I guess that's why it's part of RDR to say, well, so do they have issue with certain practices where advisors were keeping certain things and outsourcing just certain things, and it wasn't a complete outsource to the DFM, or where's the issue there? Because that's what I've gathered from what you said during the session today.
Look, I'm surprised because Leanne and Caroline love George and I. I don't know what the problem is, but no, I think the dilemma is, and that's, in my view, the FSCA is as guilty as the problems they have, and that they have issues with what they call double dipping, where you've got a discretionary fund manager he's got his multi-manager fund that invests in his own unit trust or CIS solution, and in some cases the total fee, in my view, is probably wrong. But if you do that, there's probably a good reason why you're supposed to do that, because it's your investment process. But you should then make sure that your fees remain competitive, your total fee proposition remain completely competitive. And I think what the FSA has allowed, which culminated the problem, was, I think there's 18 or 100, or I don't know, it's just getting more and more per day. 1,900, 2,000 unit trusts. So they need to regulate more and more and more and more unit trusts. But therefore, the attempt with RDR is to clean up the differentiation, that line that you referred to early in your interview today, is to make those lines clear, so that that's not blurred between advice and DFM. And that's the FSCA's challenge. And I think maybe that's why they don't like the DFMs, because it is a challenge to make sure that those lines are not blurred. But the industry has allowed itself to actually blur those lines.
Yes, cool stuff. Okay, then also I think it's a good question. Let's see how you dance with this one. As a DFM, how would you feel about being part of a flawed advice process? So this meaning that obviously on the advisor side, that the advice process is flawed. Do you get involved with that? Is it your place to get involved? From my perspective, are you also doing your due diligence on the advisors that you decide to work with?
Answer is yes. In terms of the advisor, what we certainly do is we want to get to know the advisor and how they go about their process. It's certainly something that we feel is very important. In my case, as a KI of our business, I would certainly want to make sure that the advisor that we deal with have an appropriate process. That said, from our perspective, not much can go wrong because the client has to sign a mandate to get into our portfolio. So where the advice process can be flawed is that if that mandate or that risk was not appropriately communicated between the advisor and the client. And that remains the advisor's dilemma and his regulatory risk. But so from our perspective, that's a low risk for us. But that doesn't mean that we take care in understanding the advisor's process that eventually ends up in our portfolios. It's a tough one, because especially if you look at our core portfolios. So I've just said our core portfolios are available on all the platforms and a IFA in Paternoster or Chaneen or Bloemfontein or Cape Town or Joburg can simply select that portfolio on the list. He has to get linked to it first, and there's a terms of business between us and the advisor. So we do get to know who those advisors are. But once he's selected that portfolio and sent us the mandate, what he's done on his advice process is really his responsibility. But in our process, what we're trying to achieve is to make sure that he has followed the appropriate process to understand each and every portfolio. But I think, is it Peter who asked that question?
Yes.
I think he's got a very good point, and that's what the industry and the FECA also wants to implement in the new RDR, is to make the product supplier and or the DFM responsible to at least get the record of that advice when a client's implemented in a model portfolio. And I do think that's the right way to deal with the industry problem, is that make the product supplier and the DFM co-responsible for that advice process. It doesn't sound fair, but at least then there's a due process the FECA can tick the box that the product supplier, the DFM has checked that the advice was appropriate. It will actually help the FECA in their cause over the long term. So he's touched a very important point in my view. It's not our liability at the moment. We try and understand the advisor and his process, but I think where RDR is going is to make sure that the product supplier and the DFM check that advice was appropriate into their models or products.
Yes. Cool beans. So if you want to learn more about Might and Optimal, you can go to their website. So I've put it on the screen. You're welcome to visit there, or you can connect with either George Dell or with Roeloff or with Valdo Boysen, if I remember Valdo's surname correctly, on LinkedIn.
George at mightandoptimal.com and Roeloff at mightandoptimal.com.
Yes, easy stuff. So first name at mightandoptimal.com. If you want to email them, if you want to connect on LinkedIn, or you can go visit their website to learn more about them. And so that's that from my side this morning. So let me just see. So there's one last question here that I want to just maybe quickly ask. So Neil says, other than the 0.2% fee, are there any other fees as advisors have differing sized investment books? But I mean, you said it depends on the solution that you put together and how that's made up. That actually is the thing that drives the fee. Does the size of the book also influence the fee?
It does, but that is as low as we go. Because if you think about all about the service offering, at that rate of 0.2, we don't have the investment process meeting or the consulting process with the IFA or its network. We don't have the cost of that. So when you use our core models, it's cheap. Our IFA networks and large IFAs also pay 0.2, and then the asset just depends on the size of the book. It's normally 0.25, but it doesn't get cheaper than 0.2.
Yes, awesome.
We have to add value, but we also have a process and people to pay.
Yes, absolutely. I know what it's like to work your butt off for not much. So so unfortunately there will be fees involved, and also if you think about the time and the risk that you save yourself, it's definitely worth it. Roeloff, thank you very much for joining me today once again. It was a big privilege. I really enjoyed the conversation. I learned a lot. I see George says he is from the Free State actually. Well, George, ek weet nie waar jy geleer Engels praat nie, maar it wasn't the same place as me. But anyway, so I wish you all the best. And guys, thank you very much for joining us. Tomorrow morning back at 8 a.m. and we'll have some more chats. Thanks, Roeloff. I hope you have a fantastic day.
Good luck to all. Be safe.
Thank you.